everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of Against All Odds. And as I say at the beginning of every single podcast, it's a purely selfish podcast because I get to speak to the people that inspire me. And today is no exception because I have Julie Brown with me. How are you, my lovely?
I am fabulous. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this today. It's been ages since we've spoken.
I know, right. So Julie is a coach, but in my eyes, she is like a master of people's like behaviors and emotions. And I believe that Julie can get people to see them for their real selves, really, in your authentic self. So I think you've got kind of a superpower.
I've been told that I cut through all the fluff.
Yeah.
And that I've been told that I've just got this way of seeing people, and I'm glad I do, way of seeing people past the limitations that they put on themselves, that we all put on ourselves.
Yeah. And I've got a personal thank you as well to start with.
Okay, what have I done?
Because before this podcast even started, I can remember dropping a voice note saying, I'd really like to start a podcast, but I'm overwhelmed. I have no idea what I'm doing. And you, my lovely, sorted my head out because you was like, you can absolutely do this. This is how you're going to do it. And you kind of gave me the clarity and the next step, and you stopped me using that language that I was using. And we're going to talk about people's language, aren't we, today? Because I honestly believe if we didn't have that chat, this podcast wouldn't have even started. So thank you.
Thank you for creating it, because it's been helping so many people. And that's a perfect example of how we can't say something until we say it. And when we are, language creates, the language that we use creates, we literally speak our reality through our words continuously. I don't know if you've ever heard of the word abracadabra. I'm guessing you probably have. And that comes from the Hebrew meaning of what we speak, we create. And we quite literally create our reality, or our perception of reality every day. So that day, I remember that voice note, and I was like, let's jump on a call. Let's jump on a Zoom. And it's just a case of like really giving you that space to see the gap in between like the language that we're using, the beliefs, and actually the truth of you. And that's all that was waiting to come out, was the truth of you. And hence why the podcast is.
Oh, bless you. Because there's quite a lot, your language, when we start talking about language, it affects everything, doesn't it? It's like your confidence, you've got limiting beliefs, like it actually holds you back from quite a lot. And we've both been saying before the podcast that we're constantly having to talk to people about what language they use. But it's so important, isn't it? And a lot of people run on autopilot as well and don't actually realise that they're saying it as well.
So, you know the figures, possibly neurology-wise, probably better than I do, but it's something like 80% of our days run on repeat.
Yeah.
And that includes the language that we talk to ourselves with, and the beliefs that we have, and the creation of the day that we have. So when we are constantly telling ourselves that, oh, we're not very, oh, for God's sake, you bloody idiot, why did I do that? For example. Or, oh, God, I'm stupid, I'm always doing that, or I never get things right. Like, we have to be aware of the language that we're using, because we are always listening. And our brain is like a meaning making, like a little missile that is always looking to back up what we think and give us evidence. Like, it's an evidence seeking like missile machine sort of thing. That's how I'm playing with it today. So thinking that we always get things wrong, we're going to literally have those always getting things wrong glasses on, a lens, and we're going to see things that go, your RAS is it's just literally elevated its importance. So we see it. And that's about everything. When we listen and really listen to the language that somebody uses, especially just in normal conversation. Like, if you listen to me as I'm speaking consciously now, because I'm trying to be aware of what I'm saying. Give it
Yeah.
5 minutes when I'm into this conversation and I'm just relaxed, I'm just talking. You're going to hear how I think about and how I catch myself out at times. And you'll hear me correct myself because I've got half an ear out pretty much all of the time for this now because I've delved in it and I've worked with it so deeply over the years.
Yeah.
But literally, we speak our reality, what we can do, what we can't do, what we believe to be true, and then live from as if it's true and not just an option that we've created from our mind and a
Yeah.
limitation that we've created that option from. My
Yeah.
goal is to help people move into the possibilities and from away from the limitations.
Yeah. Do you find as well that a lot of adults, let's say, it's come from childhood? Yeah.
I would, yeah. Well, I was going to say about 90%, but actually, I don't know that. That's just a figure I plucked out my head to sound good, and I don't actually know that's true or not. The truth of it is, the people that I've worked with, when we explore, like, where did you first hear that, or when did you first pick that belief up? It's between the ages of 4, 5, and 7, roughly round about there, and it could be something like a teacher telling them that they can't draw. That was mine. Like, I was told I couldn't draw by a teacher.
Yeah, I was told that as well. Yeah.
I couldn't draw, right? So I carried that belief for the rest. Even now, I still think rubbish drawer, but it came from that. I heard it and I accepted it as truth about myself. Then I repeated it. Every time I picked a pen up to draw something, I would say, oh, I can't draw. So I would constantly make that into reality and speak it constantly. Even now, if I was to pick, if you asked me to draw something, the first thing I would go is, oh, well, I can't draw. And I'm creating before I would do that, right? And that's just it's a laughable thing that but when we do that around like money, for example, so many people have the money story. And that could be, it doesn't actually have to be something that's said to you, it could be something you've heard being said between parents. Not wasting that money on them, for example, right? It could be like an ice cream, it's money parents have. So you took on board that you weren't worth spending money on. Right? And then your brain come up and you grow through life and you keep seeing more examples because you've got that belief. So your brain looks for it, finds examples, and then you come from that place 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, still living from that belief that you picked up with all of the added emotions and meanings over the years that get piled onto it. That makes it look more and more and more true. And it's still...
Yeah. Do you know what? It's like simple sayings, you know, like past generations, like there was some big ones that a lot of people said, like, I want never gets.
Yeah.
So I had that one. So it's like then when you move to adulthood, if you say you want something, it's almost like you're being greedy or needy or like you're wrong for saying, actually, I want that. And I know quite a few people that struggle with public speaking was it come from children should be seen and not heard. So it's fascinating. Yeah.
And if we do something, so I do like a life script regression sometimes. And I'll just like literally really quickly say, like, where did you first hear that? And it comes straight away. And then we go further back again, and where do you think that person first heard it? And then we go back a few, and you can see that, like, if it's, let's just say we got it from our parents, for example, and where do you think they got it from? They'll have gotten it from their parents.
Yeah.
Through the generations, everybody's sharing and doing their best. And I pretty much
so because it's not meant with malice.
It isn't. And it's not meant and we're coming into an era now where personal development's looked at and talked about so much. And 30, 40 years ago, that just wasn't the case. In no way was it as mainstream as it is now. Now we are consciously parenting our children, right? And it wasn't just open the door and I'll see you at tea time, get a clip across the ear if you come back late. That was my era, right? That's totally different. So we're more aware of the impact what we say and what we do can have on our children. But then we didn't, and it's innocent. And innocent or not, if it's impacted on us and is still impacting on us. Like, I know coaches who don't want to charge prices for their for their business because they've still got that Who do you think you are? Attitude.
Yeah.
Who are you to charge that much money? Stop showing off, and they won't celebrate themselves because it's
Yeah.
boasting. That boasting part. It could have been a teacher at school, or there's so many different ways we pick things up, and then we repeat.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the magic
Yeah.
is in. I want people to remember abracadabra, because when you speak, you are creating. If I was to pick a piece of paper and pen up now and draw something, and I say to myself, oh, I can't draw, like, is that a truth? Actually, no, it's not. I can draw something. It might not look as, it might not look as much like a flower as somebody else's, but I can draw something. So I can keep
Yeah.
myself in my land of limitations. Or I can
Yeah.
say, actually, is that really true? No, it's not, because 99.9% of the time, our limitations aren't true. We just haven't realized that we're living from them through our language, and
Yeah.
if it's true.
Yeah. Absolutely. What about language that's quite damaging, like if people are saying my anxiety, my depression, because I hear that quite a lot, and I have a bit of a problem with that.
Yeah, as soon as you own something, it's my anxiety, it's
Mm,
my depression, as opposed to I am feeling anxious or I am
yeah.
experiencing anxiety. That's the thing that to me is the difference between a fleeting experience that always changes and nobody has ever stayed anxious morning, noon, and night, day in, day out for 24/7. We all have
No.
fluctuations of every experience that we have. And we
Yeah.
never have an experience that we were not designed to have and that we would not have given the thinking we have in the moment. Right? And
Yeah.
when we own it, it's mine, like we covered and it's actually as if like we're not going to let go of it because it's mine. And again, that's all
Yeah.
that's all innocent, but the
Yeah.
brain takes it is this is ours, this is who we are, this is all we are, this is all we can experience,
Yeah.
this is everything about us is this. And then is it any
Yeah.
so if I don't know if I've got any here. I used to normally have some. Yes, I have. So if I decide to put the sunglasses on, right? Like everything
Yeah.
I'm looking at throughout these sunglasses is tainted with this. So if this were my anxiety sunglasses, and like I'm really struggling with my anxiety today, like I'm seeing everything through this lens of anxiety. If
Yeah.
I'm feeling anxious, like sometimes I feel sad, sometimes I feel happy, sometimes I feel anxious, sometimes I feel paid off. I feel all
Yeah.
emotions. But
Yeah.
so I'm always looking for like, how can I help create that little bit of space in between what we believe to be true and what
Yeah.
actually is true? No different with you with our
Yeah.
podcast, right? When we just give you a chance
Yeah.
to go back and see who you really were once your thinking settled. It's the
Yeah.
same with someone feeling anxiety, overwhelm, stress, unconfident, or if that's even a word, whatever it is. We just need to settle and wait and actually look at, is that really true?
Yeah.
People think.
Yeah. People think it is because we're automatically saying it, but it's when you question yourself. Interesting enough, I interviewed a lady last week, George Tanner, absolutely great woman, who is a professional organizer and helps people like declutter. And she'd said on my podcast as well about the language. And so she was saying the amount of women that she says she has to stop saying, can you fill the dishwasher for me? Because that for me means that we own that dishwasher. We are responsible for everything. Yeah, it's just, can you load the dishwasher? So it's even like tiny little switches like that, because of course women end up overwhelmed, feeling responsible for doing this, and this, but we're going, can you load the dishwasher for me? Can you pick your clothes up for me? She's like, it's not yours, you don't own it.
That's not on your designated list of things that will belong to you. And also another thing can be moving something into past tense.
Yeah.
So you can say, I used to feel anxious a lot. I used to feel anxiety a lot. Just even
Yeah,
putting
yeah,
used to opens up a bit of a space for saying something
yeah,
differently.
yeah,
I used to say, will you fill the dishwasher up for me?
yeah, yeah,
Right? Oh,
yeah,
I'm getting better at saying, please just fill the dishwasher up. Right?
yeah,
As
yeah.
and not all,
It's just a
because
simple
if,
thing.
and if we try and tell ourselves that we don't do something anymore, that we still sometimes do, our brain's going to go back to the we're back to, and we're going to like an elastic band bounce back into
Yeah,
what we were. So again, using language that's not going to give our brain something to argue with. So
yeah,
when we can say, like, like, I'm getting better at not saying this, or I'm getting better at starting to say a little bit of space in between what I say and what I think and how I react. I'm going to respond and not react.
yeah,
We can do, I'm just giving myself that. I'm getting better at giving myself that space. As
yeah,
opposed to, like you see some affirmations and, I am love and light and never react to anything in the universe, right? If that's not true, you're just gonna just like, lose your thing with the next person that, cuts you up in the car.
yeah.
But when you say I'm getting better at, that's always room for
Yes.
constant improvement and a bit of grace when you just when you just fall back into the human experience.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, I was actually talking to somebody today about like changing their language. And I actually said it feels really uncomfortable at first and a little bit awkward and a little bit just really uncomfortable. But it's like because your brain only knows a record of the past. So if you're going to change your language, at the beginning, it just sounds and feels really uncomfortable and awkward. So it tends to put people off doing it a little bit because it feels awkward. But I always explain to people, but that's because your brain doesn't know you talking about you nice. Do you know what I mean? Your nice things about yourself and that. So it's going to feel awkward and uncomfortable.
So the way I talk about it is, if you've ever seen like a field anywhere you go, you will see they've got beautiful like concrete paths all around. And then you'll see straight across the field, it's like a foot-worn path where people
Yeah,
take the shortcut. So our brain likes shortcuts, right?
yeah,
So sometimes to actually walk around, it feels a bit weird to actually do the walking around because we're used to just going through that shortcut.
yeah,
And it just takes a little bit of awareness.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be difficult. And for some, and we can't, I would never even say it was difficult, because one person might find it a bit tricky and one person might just click for them, and that's it. That's it. They just it makes sense and drops into this place for them. And I'm
yeah,
very mindful of not putting my I attempt to be very mindful of not putting my perceptions on people and my story and my expectations on them as well. And when we all have, every single one of us has our version of who we are.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
version of who we are isn't even created from us. As you say, it comes back from the experiences we've had, cultural beliefs, family beliefs, emotional, schools, personal experiences, all of that melting pots, all drawn in the language that we use. How many times do you hear yourself saying something and think, I sounded just like my mother there, or I sounded just like my father there, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's their
yeah,
voice
yeah,
coming out. And this is where when we can see we're doing it, we don't add judgment onto it. We don't add another layer of something to beat ourselves up over with. We just go, oh, right, it's interesting. I've done it again. What's the truth in this? If we literally just turn thought detective, what's the truth
yeah,
in this? And do it with love, kindness, compassion, and humor. They're the 4 things I always really want to work with: love, kindness, compassion, and humor. Because I really don't know anybody that speaks or would speak to somebody they love the way they speak to themselves sometimes.
yeah. You're so right.
Right.
You are so right. Yeah,
And what if you could just have a little bit more love, compassion, kindness, and humor for yourself and how you
yeah,
speak
yeah,
to yourself? That in
yeah,
itself can change how you're creating yourself. Because we are literally creating ourselves every single moment of every single day. If I came on this podcast and said, so you, before this podcast started, you said, how the heck am I going to introduce you? Because I've done so many things. And my reply was, quite old. I've done a lot of training and I've got a lot of experience in a lot of areas before we decided on this topic, right? Now, I could
Yeah.
have created myself as a child and parent coach and mental health expert. I could have positioned myself as a business coach. I could have created myself through the language that I use with you. And that's what people would have known and thought about me. And if I keep sharing that language, I'm going to believe what I hear more and more and more. Our
Yeah.
brains, remember, can't tell the difference, which, you know, I'm talking to the brain coach here, right? But our brains can't tell the difference between real and imagined. So when we
No.
say something, it's going to go to make that true for us, to look for evidence for that. So, you know,
Yeah.
whether it's all of a sudden, if I start talking about parents, I'm going to have a parent come start messaging me and go, just going to help us with such and such. The universe tends to respond to how we speak, but that's also
Yeah.
when we're talking ourselves down as well.
Yeah.
How are you creating yourself today, and how can you create yourself for you to get the most out of any situation you're in?
Yeah.
Not
Absolutely.
for anybody else, but for you.
Yeah. And it's one of them things you do have to be more self-aware of. You do have to work with it. Because I always say to everybody, your brain's got no moral compass whatsoever. So if you're going to say something bad about yourself, it's not going to go, Amy, remember when you've done this really well, or this. You know, you do have to break that pattern.
It's awareness starts with it's awareness. Like, start looking out for it.
Yeah.
And just really like have a little bit of awareness of like how am I speaking to myself today? How have I spoke to myself this afternoon? Because we
Yeah.
always know the answers to the questions that we ask ourselves. We just don't often ask ourselves.
Yeah.
And you know, if we ask that question and the answer is, you were right, bitch, to yourself earlier on. I hope I can say that in this podcast. It's too late now. So.
You can swear all you want.
But if I was to say, you know what, you was right, bitch, to myself this afternoon, I was horrible to myself. Right? If I then added, well, what do you expect? You're always horrible to yourself. And then I start adding more judgments and more affirmations of how really horrible I am to myself. What's
Yeah.
the experience of myself going to be? If I can just go, oh, I did that again. I'll catch it next time. The energy's gone from it. The energy that we put
Yeah.
into our words and our creation of ourselves makes a difference. And so
Yeah.
often we use our words as weapons against ourselves instead
Yeah.
of love notes to ourselves.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when you ask people to, like, what are their best qualities, and 9 times out of 10, if you meet somebody, they will tell you what's wrong with them first rather than their best qualities. And people do actually struggle to talk nicely about themselves. I was definitely one of those people until a few years ago.
I think most of us are, because we come from it again, a generation of it's not all about you.
Yeah.
Be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
We come from a generation of it's rude to make it all about you, or stop bragging. We come from that, you know, like, we come from that yes culture of, you know, like, do as you're told and don't speak out, don't disagree, don't, you know, our role models didn't usually or typically, if they were in our families, brag and you know, boast about ourselves. And if they did, or if somebody in their orbit did, how that person was spoken about was derogatory. So we picked up the
Yeah.
subliminal messages, even if they weren't actually told directly to us. We picked up the messages that, oh, we don't brag. Like, that's, you know, we've got to be humble. We've got to keep it. We've got to be a little bit more.
Yeah.
And there's any wonder that we then have trouble voicing what we're good at.
Yeah. It's quite sad, really, that is, isn't it?
It is, and it's all about
Yeah.
having a balance. Because again, you know, talking emptily and only ever using the pronoun, it's all about us. Again, it's a two-way relationship. Everyone is about more than one person. And there is having a balance,
Yeah.
of having a grounding and knowing who you are and what you can do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then if you know, if you want to talk about it, talking about it, and then overcompensating for doing that, talking about it as well, because we can swing the pendulum from one side to the other when we don't understand that
Yeah.
actually, you know, it's not even about how, that's not even necessarily about how we talk about ourselves. That's like how we're thinking about ourselves is how we're showing up.
Yeah.
Unconsciously, what we're, it is still talking, but it's the inner voice talking. Like, you know, tell people I do that. I can say all the time, I'm really old, I've done lots of things. And like, I know what I'm really good at. And,
Yeah.
and I can tell somebody if I need to. And like you say the same as you, like 10 years ago, that probably wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And that's
So
the thing.
what was the minute you was going, right, okay, I need to get into this, I need to help people?
So I'll tell you one of the key things that happened to me where I saw clearly I was creating my experience of life.
Right.
I'd been studying the nature of thought and how we have our thoughts, our feelings, or in our reality, and our like the things that we do. And I'd been going into a school to work with a school. I've been in a couple of times, and when I went in, it really hadn't went well because I basically told them I wasn't surprised I had the problems that I had, given the way they were running the school. It was a few weeks before
Yeah.
supposed to come back in, so it was about 5 weeks I was put off. And then the 6th week, I had other schools wanting me to come in, and I got an email from the head saying, "Really sorry, we're turning it into an academy. We're going to have to stop all of this and continue when all of this has gone through. It could take 6 months or a year." And I was furious. I was like,
Yeah.
all of this like going on, right?
Yeah.
Could have told me sooner. She should have done. I've got other schools going in. And then it was, I've been rejected. So there was that part playing out as well. So I had all of the multi things playing out in my head. So I wrote this very professional and snotty as hell email back.
Right, okay.
It was, you know, thank you very much for letting me know. As I'm sure you understand how busy and how precious our time is, would have appreciated knowing this was going on a little bit sooner, as I do have other schools who are waiting for me to go in. But I wish you all the best with the transfer and hope everything goes well. So that was pretty much the words of the email. Then I went out the house and I literally just went to the shops and I started laughing.
Right.
I was like, wow, Jules, you are really angry there. Right? And literally, I just laughed. I was like, I had that email. It was me that created all of the anger, not she wasn't even in the room, right? I've had an email, but I was the one that created it. I was the one that had a choice to went to the shops before I sent the email, and I might have seen I was angry, perhaps.
Yeah.
Right? But it really showed me that what I think in the moment, especially when I'm emotionally charged, is not the truth of what's going on. It's one option. And that was
Yeah.
when I was like, we really need people to see how they work. So I
Yeah.
was already showing people, I was already telling people, but I was telling them from a place of my training, of the truth that I saw.
Yeah.
And then there was the
Yeah.
really deep felt experience of like, wow, yes, I get this.
Yeah.
And that was this, it seems like it's a really silly thing, but when you're emotionally charged and you know we've had that experience and we're not being kind to ourselves and we're not being kind to somebody else, and then all of a sudden like, it just disappears in a puff of smoke. When I
Yeah.
realized that like I was creating that through the language, I was creating her as being rude, as keeping me hanging on. I was creating her as somebody who could have taught me a lot, who was just in a bad mood and didn't like me because I basically told her that I had a deputy head was rubbish, and you know, I had all of this narrative going on,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was the one creating all that. And it
Yeah.
looked as though it was her email that was creating me at my anger, and I was doing it myself.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw the power of language and creation
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the like I couldn't deny it level.
Yeah.
I was doing the
Yeah.
creating, and if I'm creating one thing, I can create another. And
Absolutely.
I get to choose like which if I create anger and frustration and annoyance, or I can create empathy, love, kindness, compassion, humor, and come from that place like, oh, she's got a lot going on, you know, she probably has been waiting before she didn't know what was happening. Like
Yeah.
Which part of those, which one of those do you think is going to give me a better experience, irrespective of what's going on with anybody else? Purely for
Oh
me.
yeah, the compassion bit is going to save you a few brain cells and not getting stressed out as well. So yes.
Exactly that, right?
Yeah.
So people will say, oh, we can't forgive people and this and that, but what if you're only doing, the only person you're hurting when you're holding on to is yourself?
Yeah.
What if you can let things go and notice how you're talking to yourself, start being kinder to yourself, start creating yourself more powerfully with more impact and love, kindness, compassion, and humor, and transform
Yeah.
who you are or who you see yourself to be.
Yeah.
Because we can do that at any time.
That's so true. That's so true. But it just shows you how quick it happens as well.
Yeah.
Like it's super quick without even realizing. Like you've read that email, and within milliseconds you've made your mind up that yeah.
And then just as quickly, out of nowhere, like I had a totally different experience of the same thing.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, people always say to me, "Oh, so do you not get stressed anymore? Do you not have any like bad language towards yourself?" And wouldn't that be great? But the reality
It's a
is,
bit boring, actually.
yeah, the reality is I do get stressed out from time to nowhere near as much as I used to. That shadow of a doubt, because you tend to be more optimistic and have better perceptions of things. Bad language towards myself, I am a lot better again than what I used to be. I will still say if there's a time where I start to feel overwhelmed, I now go back to right, okay, am I tired?
Yeah.
Because 9 times out of 10, if I'm tired, overwhelm creeps in massively, and I can go from having everything sorted to not coping with anything at all within a second.
Yeah.
Right?
And it feels real, right?
Yes, yeah,
As we
absolutely.
tell ourselves we can't cope with it.
Yeah,
It's too much. I can't cope with this.
yeah. Or like self-care, whether it's just sitting having a cup of coffee for 10 minutes on my own, smelling the coffee. So it'll always be, I still have to be very self-aware. It just doesn't, I always say to people, it's not like a light switch that turns off and on. Like, we've constantly got to be self-aware. But 9 times out of 10, you will tend to go back to negative self-language, overwhelm, if you're physically or mentally not doing too well.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah,
And
easily done.
when you just start asking yourself the question, what do I need right now?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what do I need right now? Like, again, people really don't realize the power of actually asking the questions, because
yes,
we have our own answers. And it
yeah,
could be like you say, if you're feeling overwhelmed, like if you just said, like, okay, so much going on, I can't be doing all this, what do I need right now? Someone's going to come up for you, come up for you.
yeah.
It's going to be, go for a walk, put a coffee on, go and have a nap, go put some music on, like take a look, you've been on the computer for the past 10 hours, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Right, if
exactly.
you understand what I mean. That's what it's like. And I've been doing this, like I've been delving into the language and how we create and how we work as humans for over 10 years now. And it's not it's not it's not an immunity, right? I don't become
No.
immune to the human experience. It
Yeah,
just means that when I experience it, one, it's not as intense usually,
yeah,
and two, it doesn't last as long,
yeah,
and three, like I can just say to myself, okay, if I'm going to be a bit kinder now, what would I do? And just
yeah,
put those options out there. So I tend to try and hold myself lightly, and I try and
yeah,
invite other people to do that, because we can have such a tight grip onto something. And if anybody drives, if you think about when you're driving your car, if you literally got into your car tomorrow and gripped the steering wheel so tightly, your driving would be terrible,
yeah,
because you would feel every little jerk and every little thing, and you would feel the tenseness in your body. And then if you take a look at how you drive, and when you just drive and the wheel just flows through your hands, and you've got a touch on it, but it's a light touch, where you actually
yeah,
have more control with less grip.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's what I'm going to suggest for as a metaphor for our lives. If you know
Yeah.
if you've got anxiety at times, or you have depressive episodes at times, or you also remember that. Would you like to play a game? Have we got 2 minutes just for me to give a fun
Yeah.
exercise or your people can play? So
Yeah.
this is something that I do with people sometimes, and it's yeah. I learned in 2014 from Phil Jeremiah, and it's called Molecules of Emotion. Now, I want you to think of a sentence that you might have said, or you might have heard people say when they are feeling anxious. Like, give me 1 or 2 sentences just to describe how that anxious feeling feels.
What I've said to people.
What if they've
Like,
what they said to you? Wait, what you know, like what someone's saying?
what if
they're
this
feeling
when
anxious?
I've been anxious,
Mhm.
I get calmed down.
Mhm.
I normally get a, oh, but you're handling things ever so well. I don't know why you're worrying.
Sorry, I'm not explaining myself very well. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm talking
sorry.
about language. I'm not explaining myself very well. Here we go.
Go on.
So I want you to tell me. I hate it when I feel anxious, because when I feel anxious, I feel it all in my body, and my talking goes, and I might be sweating, and my palms might go clammy. And like, how does it feel when you're anxious? Describe anxiety, that anxious feeling in your body to me.
So mine would be sweaty palms every time.
Mhm.
Like feel of dread in my stomach.
Mhm. Give me one more.
I get quite tearful if I'm anxious. Yeah.
So I want you to think about somebody that you love
Yeah.
spending time with. Like,
Yeah.
always have a smile on your face when you tell them, right?
Yeah.
And imagine you spending time with that person, and tell me them
Yeah.
same 3 things again.
I can't.
Your palms get sweaty. You have that feeling of dread, right? Say
Yeah.
the same things.
Yeah. The feel of dread. Yeah.
And
That's teary. Yeah.
right. So can you see how it's a different felt experience?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now I want you to think about being bored. You know, like you're listening
All
to
right.
somebody. So we were talking about somebody earlier on that you thought, oh, crikey,
Yeah.
can't wait to get out of the room. Imagine that person's talking now.
Oh yeah.
Right. Now say those 3 phrases again. Tell me those 3 things again.
So sweaty palms, feeling dread in the stomach, and tears in my eyes. Yeah.
Now, when you're feeling, can you feel the difference in how even the same
Yeah.
experience? So now, if you were
Yeah.
to be, you're going on holiday tomorrow, you're really excited. You call me, you're really excited. Like, imagine
Yeah.
that for a second. Just doesn't take long to get into that. Imagine
Yeah.
that, even if you're faking it, put it on like as if, let's play the as if game. Tell me about it, and
Yeah.
you're really excited. Tell me about again the 3 things as if.
Okay. Yeah. So sweaty palms,
Huh?
feeling of dread in the stomach, and tears in the eyes.
Can you notice how it feels different?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when somebody comes to me and they tell me about the anxious feelings, if they are in a space where they're willing and open to playing this game and exploring, and it's not usually when they're in the midst of it, because when we're in the midst of it, we're flooded with the chemicals, and we need for that the body just to do its
Yeah.
task on that. But afterwards, when we can talk about it and look at it, I can play that game with them, and just like we can go into joy, we can talk about depression, we can go into happiness, we can go into curiosity, we can go into boredom, we can go into jumping for joy, we can go into being bubbly, we can go into being sour and dour, and we can go up, see where we can go through a range of emotions and still talk about the same experience, and the experience changes whichever as if we step into. Right.
Yeah.
Now that
Yeah.
gives a really felt experience of how we create the feelings in our body. So it's
Yeah.
not about a fake positivity, but when we are catching ourselves being mean to ourselves, we're normally coming from that like slumped place. We're normally coming from that, oh God, please. And have you ever noticed when you're having a good time, you never look for who's to blame?
No.
Right?
You don't, do you?
So
It's
if
your
something's
fault
going
I'm
really
having a nice
well,
night.
it's like, I'm really happy today. Whose fault is this? Right? We don't do that.
Yeah,
But when we're
yeah,
feeling like anxious or sad or depressed or fed up or peed off or annoyed, it's who is it to blame, as opposed to all of them are just human emotions.
yeah,
Giving the thinking that we have at that time, giving the way that we are bringing that thought to life with our language and being
yeah,
tag teamed with the chemicals, we're having a felt
yeah,
experience. And
yeah,
what that felt experience was nothing more than literally like a robotic going through the motions of chemical reaction, physical feeling. And it meant
yeah,
not, like when we take the
yeah,
meaning out of something, we take the power out of it. We
yeah,
take the energy
absolutely.
out of it. And this
Yeah,
emulsions of emotion game, like play with that with your people, because I think you like it. The more you really go into it, it's really good fun. And it can make a
yeah,
big difference because people repeat their stories, as we said, 80% of the
yeah,
time. And when we're
yeah,
repeating
yeah,
stories, when we change the energy even if we just change the energy, changing the experience, and we're opening
yeah, yeah,
the gap for possibilities. And that's where I like to play, in the land of possibilities.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's one of those where it's like, now you said that, I mean, it's not that I disagree with therapy at all. I do believe that there's a place for therapy.
Yeah.
But from a neuroscience point of view, every time you go back there, you are feeling exactly the same brain chemicals as if it was happening right now.
Exactly, I agree. And you're adding meaning onto it, and you're not even remember the original event. You're remembering
Yeah,
the remembered events with all of the added extra I should have, this meaning, why did I, judgments and all of that on as well is the
yeah, yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's like so I learned to swim when I was 40. I turned 40, right, and I learned to drive because I failed my driving test at 18 and never bothered again.
Yeah.
And I learned to swim as well because it was one thing I couldn't do, right? So I thought, right, I'm gonna do this swimming, right? So if I stood, so before I turned 40, if I stood at the edge of a swimming pool, I would, even though I wasn't trying to get in the swimming pool, I'd have the sweaty palms.
Yeah.
I'd have the feeling of dread. My legs would feel wobbly. When I booked the swimming lessons, even though I was sat on the sofa,
Yeah. Yeah.
booking those swimming lessons, I had sweaty palms. My legs had gone funny. I had exactly the same physical response as if I was standing next to a swimming pool right at that time.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow,
Yeah.
you know, that's quite shocking. So I'd literally put myself there.
I was working with a lady who used to ride horses, and a horse ran away with her mistake.
Right, okay.
And she had this she got a fright, she got that, you know, and it doesn't take long for that shock to set in and
Yeah,
kick off the limbic system and the fight or flight response. And from then on, every time she was going to the stables, she was having the full panic. So she thought she was never going to be able to ride a horse again. I went to her house and I was like, let's show me the car. Should we go to the stables now? She was like, do you want to? I was like, yeah, if you're happy. I went, I'm happy to go with you. So we got in the car and we got out of our street, and she was starting to feel all the emotions. She was just the same as what you were saying. She was feeling it all. And she was driving, and she was like, my palms are getting really sweaty. I can feel my throat going. Can I just pull over? I asked you, pull over for a second. So we pulled over, and I went, can I ask you a question? And she went, huh? I went, are we at the stables? No. I went, is the horse anywhere near in sight? No. I went, then how is it the horse that's causing you then? And
yeah,
penny just dropped. It was her thinking about what was going to happen, that she was
yeah,
believing to be true, that was causing
yeah,
it. And when that dropped, like literally, like another story would be like a mentor of mine was working with a telephone pole guy, and the guy was scared of heights, which was unfortunate because his job was at the top of these bloody telephone poles, right? And he had him come into his office and went, bring all your kit next time you come. And he took him out, and he was on the floor, and he said, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how anxious are you feeling? And he was just like 7, maybe 7, maybe 8. no, it's definitely an 8, and I'm thinking about it. And he was off feet on the floor, he was going up. He went, on you, up you go. And you're like, okay, so you got 3/4 of the way up. And he went, right, start to come down. And he got him down less than halfway. And he went, stop there for a second. He went, right, he went, on a scale of 1 to 10, what are you feeling now? And he went, about a 2.
Right.
So he came down and he went, your feet were on the floor and you were a 7 going into an 8. You were actually up at the flipping pole and you were a 2. How is
Yeah.
it heights that are your problem? You do not have a height problem. You have a thinking about your heights problem.
Yeah.
Because if it was the heights, when he was up there in the height, that's when he would have been the 8 and his feet on the ground would have been the 0 or the 2.
Yeah.
This is how we create our reality all of the time. And
Yeah.
when we don't see that, we're just, you say, we're having that re-experience that we're creating, and it feels real because we're feeling all the feels.
Yeah.
We haven't got any space to open up for the gap to see what else could be going on or what's really going on. That's
Yeah.
what magic lies in that space.
Yeah. It's so true. And I think it's a game changer learning about that. It's even like, people like jokingly talking bad about themselves as well.
Ooh, that's the
I
worst.
mean,
It can be one of the worst.
it is, because your brain's got no sense of humor whatsoever.
Just hears the words.
Yeah, just hears the words, and you hear a lot of people. Well, I definitely hear a lot of people that are basically taking the piss out of themselves in a joking way, and I'm like, oh,
It's actually how they think about themselves. What they're doing
yes,
is telling
yeah,
you exactly how they think and feel about themselves. They think it's been masqueraded over a joke, but it's not.
no.
So if you joke about yourself, if you're listening to this and you're one of those people that makes a lot of jokes about yourself, I'm going to invite you to hold yourself a bit lighter and be a bit kinder.
Yeah.
To start off with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's everywhere. And if it's one thing that I could change in the world, it'd be the way that people spoke about themselves, because I honestly believe that people will be more confident, that they would have less like things to hold them back. But the reality is, it's like negative self-talk, it's not like, it's just not one group of people, it's across the board of all ages. Because you've got to think, there's been, I don't know, where jobs have been lost, where people have now not got the confidence to go for a job that's higher or similar because of the scared of, that happening again. It's people that have been through divorce, and it could be that they don't feel like they're worthy of, meeting somebody else. Things happen in people's lives, a lot of challenges. That is life, unfortunately. I don't know a single person that has not been through a challenging
None of us
time.
get through unscathed.
Yeah, the kind of aftermath of that is the language that we've come away from it. That's the sad thing for me, that
it's also one of the easiest things that just with a bit of awareness we can change, and literally is life changing. Because again, what I find when people have lost jobs or had divorces, they own that experience, right?
Yes, yeah,
and so they own that as who they are as a person,
yeah,
as opposed to something that's happened. And if, say, for example, if getting a divorce would mean that you weren't going to be comfortable or confident going out meeting other people, for example, or you couldn't trust anybody in the world again because you've been hurt, been treated as nicely, or as well as perhaps you could have been, or maybe even should have been. But if you've got whatever meaning that you've made up about other people in the world as a whole, and how people can't be trusted or are only out for themselves, or all of that, like if that was truth, then every single person, like if I drop this pen, every time I drop this pen, it's going to fall without exception. There's never going to be a time like that pen's not going to drop, because that's a universal truth, right? If it's somebody having a divorce meant that you couldn't trust people, then everybody who in the world who've been divorced would never be able to trust people. The
Yeah, yeah,
difference when we can see it's our personal thinking, our
yeah,
experiential thinking, and it's how we felt, and we were perfectly right in feeling at that time. It served its purpose, and perhaps if it's not serving us now, it's time to tweak, because everything we learn we can update, we can tweak, and we can change. And something that was
yeah,
helpful, it might be helpful to have those walls up and those barriers up if we're going through a tricky time. Might be helpful to not stick our head above the parapet in the olden days, when we stick our head out the cage, we get it chopped off, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
literally, like when we are now in these days and age, like when we're past that, if we are still living from that after the healing period, that's when it's time to really look at how we're speaking and how we're creating ourselves and our world to be, because it's not serving
yes,
us. And it's
yeah,
never as complicated and as complex as we think it is to change. We think change, people, we're designed to resist change. Again, go to
yes,
the lizard brain, we're not meant to be changed, because safety, the safety in the knowing. So we're going to
yeah,
always have a little bit of the feels around change,
yeah,
which is why I don't really talk too much about we've got to change. It's more about, like, let's open up a gap to see what else we can see. What else
yes.
is?
That's it. It's like not about changing completely who you are. It's about becoming a better you, like that feels calmer and having self-worth and feeling content with yourself instead of beating yourself up. So that's not a completely, identity change. We're just making it a nicer environment to be in.
Yeah, it's like if you've got a home, right? If your home was barren and cold, and the windows weren't working very well, and like there was nails sticking out of the floorboards, and you kept catching your feet every time you were walking along, like,
Yeah,
something about that. So why don't you do something about that when it's your internal home and your internal thinking about yourself?
yeah,
We can play with that, and it can literally be like a step at a time, just looking at, like, how can I hold myself a bit lighter? How can I just notice I've said that again and go, oh, okay, it's there. I don't have to, I'm not going to add any wood on the fire about it even. Literally not adding
yeah,
any wood on it makes a difference. Because
yeah,
every memory that we have of everything that's ever happened, we are never recalling as you've just mentioned, as a memory, as a real experience. We've added
mm,
on the how we felt afterwards, looking back. We've added on the things we should have done, or we shouldn't have done, or we should have said, or we shouldn't have said. We're adding on whatever mood we're in while we're recalling it. If we're in a bad mood or grumpy mood, then we're adding on all of that. And then every time we're updating that memory, so it's never a pure memory.
no,
I've done
no,
regression and clean space with somebody, and this person had not spoken to a member of their family for a lot of years because a previous therapist had told them that they were abused. And we went through the clean space thing, and they saw as clear as day that it never happened, that memory had been triggered, and then they built it up. No, I wasn't there, but I just
yeah,
know that after that exercise, they were able to reconcile, create a much better life for themselves and the relationships, and literally moving on from that, like all these years later, their life is just from struggling and being such a dark place. Like, not saying the therapist did or didn't, I'm not, that's not my place of judgment. What I'm saying is we think we remember something as it is, and
yeah,
there are always other layers going on at the time, that other things that are
yeah,
trying to protect us that we don't always see, which is, it's been proven, you've got to check in with what you're feeling. If you go for a girls' night out, even, I mean, you have a girls' night
yeah,
out, and it was an all right night, no special, it was all right. And then
yeah,
the next day we're like, or 2 days later, we're gonna really, like, feeling poorly, really in a bad mood, can't be bothered, and someone says, how was that night out? You're gonna go, it was all right. Right, so then we'll remember it. We remember it's been, yeah, it was all right, because we've added that extra
yeah,
on. If we're
yeah.
in a really good mood and we're like, oh, you know what, it was all right. Like,
Yeah, it's the best night ever.
it doesn't even have to be the best, and we can just go, actually, it was all right, but we're in a better place. When we remember it,
Yeah,
we remember, oh, actually, it was all right. It was a funny night. So we
yeah,
can literally go
I,
from one or the other.
yeah. But it's like when I talk to people about memories, obviously mum with her Alzheimer's and things
Yeah.
like that, and our memories, they're not the best. They're not the best. And I always say it's like having a food blender that's going on full power with no lid on.
Yeah.
Because our memories, you know, everybody thinks our memories get stored in order in little tiny boxes.
Fractionated all
They,
over
ne-
the
they
place.
never change, but they're basically thrown all over the place. So you can literally create a whole memory of something that's not even happened. Like, you know, it's like even things like
Piggyback or latch on to something else that you've heard or another memory at a time.
yeah. It's like eyewitnesses in court and things like that don't
Yeah, that's why
stand.
they are so notoriously unreliable.
Yeah,
Because those
unreliable.
memories that
There was
bad,
actually there was actually a case in America which unfortunately a lady had to go through something that was not nice with the man. But what she'd done during the attack is she'd made sure that she stared at him all the time so she could remember his face. So when they did the lineup, she walked in there going, I know exactly who it was because I remember his face. She actually picked the wrong person and it was found through DNA. But that just shows you that you can try and remember everything, every little detail, but your emotions will always add things on.
That's the thing we've got so much going
and
on.
distort. And then have broken bits, and so you can never really trust your memories.
And the good thing about that is, again, you know, not talking about not being a therapist or wanting to go into therapy, because I used to go into therapy, but now I think this is just feels much more true to me, is we can, when we're working on what we're going to create and build and do now, we're not just repeating the past, because we can't change that.
No.
Like, we've already survived all of it. Like, you know, we've all been through our own scrapes of life.
We survived,
right, and we are here surviving and standing, and there's going to be aspects of us that have been influenced and flavored with those experiences for sure, and we get to create every experience and everything that we have from this moment onwards. We can do that with the power of our language. And if even if we're talking about the past and we're building things up and we're talking about it that way, like, we're not helping ourselves. But when we are starting with, again, love, kindness, compassion, and humor, like, humor is important for me, but it's not from a sarcastic, let's really like beat ourselves up. It's just like I was laughing that day across the board. I was like, wow, Jules, you were really angry. Just a humor with a softness around it, as opposed to, you know, as you say, slating yourself under the guise of humor. There's a difference. Hold yourself lightly and notice how you want to create yourself. And if how you're talking to yourself isn't creating a version of you that's helpful, what can you say now to start changing it? Sometimes even just changing the tense on that makes a difference. Like, I'm not ready to be yet, as opposed to I never get there, or I never get what I want. I haven't got what I want yet. Change the possibility.
The power of yet
into possibilities. That's where we want to be, and we do that all the time in our lives.
Fantastic. Right, I've got one last question for you. I don't know whether you know this one. Everybody struggles with this one, but I think this is perfect for this interview and what we've been talking about. Julie, tell me 3 good things about yourself.
3 good things. I am an amazing connector. Like, I really can connect well with people. I'm a really good listener for someone who talks so well. Beyond the words. And I can see the brilliance in people, no matter who they are. I
like that. I do like that. So if people want to find out more about what you do, where can they find you on social media?
Facebook's my primary. I'm a bit towards now, do you see, I've been really good throughout this, and then I went straight into it there. Now, so this is like, none of us are immune to it. I was just about to say I'm too old for Instagram. Now, that's absolute bollocks, right?
It is, mate. Yes.
This is how quick, this is how easy and sneaky and quick our language creates. But this is also how we can catch it. So I went and I heard the next line in my head and I stopped it. And then I used it as a teaching point, as an example. Right. So and I've done this for years. Like, it's not an immunity. it just means that we can pick it up, and we don't delve into the bottom of the well. We just like, I might have a bit of a plodge in the pudding instead.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Facebook.
Great. Facebook, lovely. I shall get your links out there. Well, thank you ever so much for being an absolute legend on the interview, for helping me, kicking my ass getting the podcast sorted. And I will say, just being there for whenever I've needed something, you've just always come back with like a different, to get me to look at a different perspective, because we all need that at some point. So thank you very much, my lovely.
Anytime, my lovely lady, anytime.